Hello and a very, very warm welcome back to MoneyLIVE Nordic Banking Online Festival. Great to have you here now and in conversation, exploring how customers' mobile appetites and behaviors are changing, also how that affects banks and payments providers in many, many ways. Let's meet our fantastic speakers. First of all, Olav Gulbrandsen. Hello, Olav.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you.
Good to have you here. Great to see you there. Olav is the head of digital channels at DNB. Wonderful to have you with us. Okay, and next we have Bragi Fjalldal. Hello, Bragi.
Hello, guys. Happy to be here.
Great to have you here. Bragi is the Chief Marketing Officer and Vice President of Business Development at Meniga. Great to have you both with us today. Let's get talking and start by looking at how customer expectations are changing, particularly when it comes to mobile. Bragi, first of all, what do you think is driving change and appetites and what customers expect from banks on their mobiles?
Well, I think in terms of what's driving change today, I think I'd maybe highlight three things. I mean, first, I think it's helpful just to take a step back and think about, what's been driving a change in expectation in the past few years. And I think that sort of drive has really come from outside the banking sector. When you think about it, we've all been taught how to engage with our mobile phones by apps like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and so on. And these guys have really kind of set the expectations that the rest of us have to live up to. And maybe this is a little bit, an obvious point, but I think it's important that banking will not redefine how we engage with our phones. But I think rather that, the best mobile banking apps will take inspiration from these digital leaders and apply it to banking. And as an example, I can mention that many of Meniga's best performing products have been inspired by digital leaders, like our Facebook-like financial activity feed that sort of, brings insights and nudges together and puts it in front of the customer. Our Fitbit and Strava inspired financial challenges that help people save in small attainable increments and so on. So I think it's important to take that learning. I think secondly, I'd say open banking. And when I say open banking, I don't mean the infrastructure. I mean the movement itself. Data is becoming more readily available. We have more and more innovative new things coming to market every year. I mean, things like social bill splitting, subscription management, cashback rewards. And this year, I think one of the hottest things is carbon footprinting, something that Meniga is also now offering. And I think the list of expectation when it comes to what kind of financial services to consume in mobile is growing rapidly. And I think banks need to kind of figure out, what works for us and how do you integrate that in a good way. And I think the third thing I just mentioned is COVID. But for me, COVID is just about momentum. I think, you've got more mobile banking users, engagement is through the roof, demographics may be changing. But to me, that's really an acceleration of pre-existing trends. And I think to the second part, I mean, what are the expectations? I think the important thing to remember is that I think banking customers, are at their most demanding in the mobile channel. They're more demanding in the mobile channel than any other channel. And the only thing you have to do is to think about yourself. I mean, you expect a lot of value. You expect positive reinforcement. You have no patience whatsoever in the mobile phone. Your attention span is practically zero, right? And so it's a different way of communicating, right? And the final thing I'd say is that we are super selective. There's a lot of options out there. And I think most of us use 5, 6, maybe maximum 10 apps on a regular basis. And I think you should be aspiring to become, one of those apps. And if you do that well, you've done extremely well, which is one of the reasons I get a little bit upset when I hear banks talk about multi-app strategies. But I do think this is, the crux of it is that, how you build this app is just as important as what it is that you put in it.
Well, I mean, I think if anyone wants to sort of think about the aspects and factors in customer expectations, just go back and listen to that, because you covered a lot of the bases there. And I think, from the customer point of view, yes, we're impatient. We don't want to wait for these things. Mobile is a place where actually to get access immediately and good access straight away. Olav, what do you think? I mean, there are so many things covered by Bragi there, but anything else that you think is really, really important in terms of our expectations?
No, I think, as you said, Bragi is touching on a lot of very, very good points here. And I think we're clearly seeing that on our end as well. I think the user simplicity is key here. I think you want customers really want that daily banking to be friction-free, very smooth, very sort of easy to engage with. And I think it's worth to keep in mind that in general, banking is quite low interest. So people kind of tend to want to do things quite easy, smooth, friction-free, very, very, very simple. But what we also see, and I think you're spot on, Bragi, in saying that COVID has actually accelerated this, is that the expectation towards the mobile banking app and the offering that's put into that goes beyond that sort of daily banking, friction-free, just getting to pay your invoice very quickly. I think we see a big trend towards customers wanting us to engage more, giving tips, giving tricks, giving advice, sort of providing the overview of your financial situation, making actionable insights readily available for you, sort of presenting an article that is relevant to your context, giving a tip or a trick on sort of this is a relevant product for you. So I think we're clearly seeing sort of the fundamentals is still there in terms of simplicity, but the acceleration in terms of actually expanding and going beyond that base is clear to me.
So, I mean, do you believe, Olav, that we need to be mobile first now? I mean, many aren't, and many very successful banks don't need to be perhaps at the moment. But what do you believe, and why? Why is mobile first a really valuable thing to look at right now?
I think mobile first to me makes a lot of sense. It depends maybe a bit on the context and your starting point, but also for DNB, we've adopted this strategy of mobile first, but also added a bit of a nuance of saying, but not mobile only. And I think that comes from our sort of incumbent bank position that we need to service the entire market. But mobile first to me gives a lot of advantages. Of course, clearly mobile is the platform with the highest growth, both in terms of number of users, frequency of use. It's an attractive demographic. You have early adopters, sort of very engaged on that platform. People are also, I think, much more willing to experiment and to look into slightly different value propositions and sort of give you feedback on that and test and try and fail and learn on that mobile platform. So it's a good place to also innovate and to test new things. Yeah. And of course, just mobile gives you the opportunity through creating native experiences to actually leverage quite a lot of the just device-specific things. So you can have geo, you can leverage the camera, you can leverage the biometric sensors, you can have haptic feedback on your customer experience. So mobile also gives you that opportunity of accelerating and creating something even smoother and even better than on many other platforms currently.
Yeah. There's no. I mean, Bragi, there's no harm, and actually, it's a very good way to even with existing customer base to start simple, to start with those great frictionless interactions on mobile, to start that way, because then you can also offer obviously the depth and the other things where you can manipulate your screen in different ways. It's really a physical thing in some ways. So and mobile first, not mobile only, was one thing that Olav said there. What should be in your mobile first, not mobile only strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I think it all kind of starts with, how do you want to be perceived by your customers as a bank, right? I mean, you simply need to ask that question before you start, because I think for different banks, it can be different things, do you want to be sort of the best transactional device, or do you want to be the sort of trusted financial advisor, if you like? And so, when somebody looks at your app, why would they be using that app? And I think for most of our clients, the game is really about becoming that financial app. And if that's your case, then I think you need to figure out how do you create this environment that facilitates this continuous dialogue between the bank and its customers around personal finances. You need more elements to draw people back into the app than just transactional elements like paying bills and checking your balance and so on, because if your goal is to be that partner, if your goal is to start cross-selling products through the mobile environment, you first have to create the environment. And you need people to be coming into your app for the right reasons. They have to be coming into your app looking for advice, not coming into your app just to do transactional things.
Yeah, you've got to build. People have got to want to be with you enough to investigate.
Exactly, and it's back to what I said before. It's like, okay, so if most of us are kind of using 5 to 10 apps on a regular basis, and you want to become that one app, then I think you kind of have to be the one-stop shop for personal finance needs, because you're not going to be using 2 or 3 different apps for this. So like you have to really think like, what are the things that I need in order to draw people back in for the right reasons? And I think Olav touched upon some of these things, like nudges and advice, I think is one thing. I think another thing is just, it's like, making things frictionless, but having a depth. So, one of the things that I typically think about, and I think people sometimes ignore because it sounds too simple, is just like the transaction itself. The transaction is everywhere in mobile banking, right? You need to make that transaction interactive. What happens when you click on it? What do you see? More information about your merchant. Maybe you have a cashback reward offer with that merchant. You get an overview if you're spending in that category. You can set a limit. And it's so frictionless because you don't have to push it. But you'll find that some people do, and other people, they build a habit around the information that you put in there. So I think it's figuring out that path is key.
In our last discussion, I think Tim said that banking mobile apps are some of the best on the market. They do the job really well, and people use them. And then Eva said that the most important thing is accessibility. Look, there was something with way back in the early days of YouTube. If you wanted to put something out, you put it where people are. You have to have access and the ability to tap into people and what they want to do. That's really important. Olav, I've got a couple of questions for you. What can we learn from neobanks, and what can we learn from retailers in terms of what they do with mobile? Neobanks first, retailers second.
Right. I think for the neobanks, it's clear that the relentless focus on customer experience, to me, is one thing that can clearly be learned. And I think banks do adopt this and have also sort of adjusted their approach accordingly. But I think there's certainly room to still learn in terms of focusing on the user first, and then this notion of, if you focus on the user, then everything else will kind of fall into place in terms of also getting your financials right and growing your user base, creating those user experiences, and really invest in the customer relationship and invest in those user journeys. Yeah. And I think another thing that they're doing quite right is also the ability and willingness to challenge the way that product services, sort of user journeys are actually created, and maybe have a bit of a different think on sort of the way that you present an account, or the way that account is actually constructed, or the way that sort of some of those core banking components are actually created towards those customers. Yeah. And I think we do take inspiration from that, and we do see that sort of there's certainly lessons to be had there. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I ask you? I mean, we're not paid by any app providers here, apart from our own. But any apps out there that you think work really well? I mean, they could be in a completely different industry. Ones that are responsive, that do allow you to do something quickly, jump in, jump out. It could be a gaming app. I don't care. Bragi, any apps that you find useful, and it could be very convenient. I've given you lots of options, I guess.
Let me pick two. One from financial services and one that is not. And I'm going to pick a very obvious one because it gets people hooked. And it's Facebook, because I mean, like, you can sort of laugh at it, but like, most of us, even the ones that don't admit it, it's like you spend way more time than you really should in this app, right? And there's a lot of things that they get right, because they sort of hook you in, they get you invested in the product, you start putting things in, they have you go check for your likes. There's a lot of these little elements that make you want to get back in. It's not, there's a science behind it. It's not rocket science. It's positive reinforcement and things like that. And I think the good thing about financial services is that, I mean, honestly, I think there is sort of a movement that's kind of starting around, being responsible with people's time. And I think people spend way too much time on Facebook than for their own good. But with financial services, checking in, even every day or a few times a week, getting an overview of your finances is a good thing, because it puts you in control. So I think, there's those techniques that Facebook is using, are techniques we should employ in financial services in a sort of responsible way. The other app, which I haven't used very much because I'm not in the UK, but I've been impressed with, is Monzo. And I just want to go back to what Olav said about customer focus. One thing that I think banks can learn from guys like Monzo is community engagement and tone of voice. Like, how do you speak to your customers? It's so important that you talk to people like they're people. You ask them for their opinions on your product, on what's coming up. I mean, Monzo has gone to the point of kind of opening up their product roadmap, getting people onto beta testing. And it's not like your whole customer base will do it. But what Monzo did, they kind of built this group of ambassadors that influence the rest, that become the bearers of your brand. And I think that's something that could be inspirational for incumbents, to do in a bigger way. And it's of course tricky to do it in the right way, but I think if you do it right, it can be super impactful.
We'll go on to real-time services, Olav, in a second. But again, it's a similar thing to you, really. Bragi mentioned tone of voice. Normally, if we were dealing with more conventional services, we might be on the phone to somebody or so on, and that tone of voice would be the one that we take away with us. When you're doing it digitally, when you're doing it on mobile, it's the turn of phrase. It's the way that that things do evolve, that transitions do happen. It's the experience visually that you respond to. Good apps, bad apps. What do you think?
No, I think maybe if I just turn the question a bit around and to say that. So actually, because I think there's certainly a lot of very good apps out there that we do take inspiration from, and Bragi has mentioned some of them. I think only in the financial sector you have a lot of very good examples there. But I think in terms of getting and creating that user experience, it's not only about implement that feature or that type of navigation or doing it like that. To me, it's also a lot about how you actually set yourself up also internally, and how you and that's also where we take a lot of inspiration, because traditionally also in DNB we had a mobile banking app for many years that was updated maybe once a year, and mainly non-functional. It didn't really have that much sort of customer centricity to it. We've changed that around, building a new mobile banking app, which we update almost daily and sort of have releases to the customers much more frequently. And I think that's also some of the part that those apps are doing, or those companies are doing, is sort of iterating together with the customers and testing out, okay, if I, to your point around tone of voice, what if I do it like this? What if I write it like that? What if I, the customer flow or the user journey is like that? How does the customers then respond? If you're able to sort of quickly change that around, and that's what we see a lot of the best players are doing, is actually testing, iterating, doing small things, and sort of continuously coming towards that sort of very good customer experience. So to me, it's sort of, there's a lot of good examples out there for how you can do it. But in terms of mimicking that, I would never try to mimic a customer experience. I would try to sort of set myself up for that success and set myself up for that sort of delivery capability and ability to be close to the customer, and sort of to test out all of those sort of user flows, tone of voice, see how the customers are actually responding to it. Yeah.
Like a little public sandbox, continuously trying to test things out.
And as I said, on mobile, people are so willing to do that, and so willing to engage, and so willing to give feedback and be with you to iterate. I mean, within the course of a year, I think we've rewritten our payment flow 3-4 times, and a lot of different iterations to the way that everything from just date picking to the flow to how things are done. And that's really where you want to go, because then you're actually sort of iterating towards that optimal, or not optimal is never going to be, I think that's the wrong word, but sort of that better customer experience.
Very good. One thing that we all want is information and control over our finances to whatever degree we want to manipulate them, right? We certainly want clear information. So how have you worked with the DNB app in order to try to bring that into play, and to make sure that communication is free flowing, and that we customers can choose how we talk to you and get a good answer, really?
So I think we've done quite a lot actually in terms of developing what we call these PFM inside services, those types of things into the app. And what people tend to forget is that one thing is about the visual UI and parts of that. A lot of the work has actually gone into data, and to try to actually create a solid data foundation. In DNB, we've invested a lot of time in and efforts into data governance, into building an analytics platform, etc. And that's sort of the basis and the fundament for doing that. And then on the back of that, we've tested and developed sort of categorization features, safe to spend. I think we're actually the only bank in Norway that sort of gives you a prediction for what your account balance will look like at the end of the month, or sort of the day before your next salary, subscription detection, all of that, and trying to invest into that space. And I think here again, simplicity is key. You don't want the categorization of 100 different categories. You want actionable insight. You want sort of, this is the overview and this is your financial situation. And
I think this is super important. Also, back to what you said before, Olav. I mean, and I've been, working with Meniga for some time, working with banks, and I think, we are seeing, I think, banks more and more sort of looking at sort of digital engagement and just digital channels as a long game, and because I think I have to admit, like 4 or 5 years ago, I was getting super frustrated because people were always looking for that silver bullet. It's almost like you said, it's the feature that's going to solve a problem, which is wrong, right? You have to invest in the underlying data structure, in the right agile teams, because, if you really want to be the best, it's a journey. Like, it's a long game. It's not like a quick fix that you just sort of you view as a capital investment. Innovation is a journey. And I think not all banks are there, but I think more and more are getting in that direction. And also when it comes to kind of working with fintechs, I think one of the key things when you're sort of thinking about innovation is you don't have to do everything yourself. And if you're one of those players, I think you need to also think about, like, how do I become better at working with fintechs? Because it's tricky being a big company working with a small fintech and vice versa. And I think that's also kind of evolving. But I think you also need to think of your fintech partners as long-term partners. I think that's the way to go if it's to be sustainable. And I think we see positive developments in this, but there's been many frustrations, I think, over the years in terms of getting there.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. One area that's come up a lot this week is personal finance management. Do you think that apps, Bragi, could be a place where there's more financial management done by customers on mobile? Do you think that could be an offering that is useful to us?
Yeah, but I would say, PFM is such a broad and loaded term, and that's coming from a company that's often associated with PFM. But I don't see PFM as an isolated functionality in the mobile banking app. I see it as an integrated part of everyday banking. It's back to what I said before. I think personal finance management functionality should be created to build, sort of a mobile environment that projects an advisory, bank, and that means things like categorizing transaction. It means making the transaction interactive. It means having advice, nudges, and notifications, and having a place in the app where you can see it. It means integrating the kind of functionality we've been talking about today, and Olav has also mentioned subscription management, cashback rewards, and other things, and do it in a seamless way. I don't believe in PFM as a thing or as an app. I believe it is an integral part of banking, because as a bank, you are helping people manage their personal finances. So to me,
just to echo that, Bragi, I think you're spot on, and to me also, it's. One thing is about let's call it components, as you say. Categorization is one part of it, but it's what you build on top of that, and it's the content that you can provide around it. It's the insights that you can put. It's not only sort of telling you that you spend X amount of money on housing each month. Then okay, but so what? What does that actually mean for me? How can I engage with my bank to sort of see? Okay, I'm spending this much on food. Is that good? Is that bad? How can I set up a budget for doing that? Can you nudge me to sort of change? What can I actually do about that insight? And there, I think also the content part of it, and sort of providing a much more holistic thing around it, and as you say, integrating it into the experience. Yeah. I think that's where also I would imagine differentiation coming up in this space going forward is the way that you're able to take those, call it basic concepts, and actually adopt that into a holistic service offering to the customers.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
We would call them value-added services. It's actually adding value. It is about the value that you can get through your app in this case. I mean, that's it's very clear. Thank you very much for that. It's really good. It is time to wrap up this particular conversation. Olav and Bragi, thank you very much indeed for joining us. It's been a real pleasure. Okay, let's bring in our commentator MARCEL to quickly analyze some of what we've just heard. MARCEL, good to see you there. Well, look, hello. What do you think? What key things came through for you? Because we've talked before we came on today about what Raisin's up to, and the audience there as well. There's many elements here to get right, but you have to make the judgment yourself, depending on your customer base, depending on the services you can offer.
Yeah, maybe I would like to start with sharing a little bit the Raisin perspective. So we launched about 8 years ago. We took a web-first approach, and the reason was because our customer base was on average 60 plus, and the main product we offered was a 1-year fixed term deposit where people would, our customers would invest around 50,000 euros. So we thought this is nothing you would do on the way to work on your mobile device. However, it turned out we just launched a mobile app around half a year ago, and there are a lot of use cases that we underestimated in the past, and this is exactly the topics you also brought up. Checking your wealth, yeah, this happens daily, weekly, just putting you in control of your money. See, it's also about building trust. The money is still there. Another big use case we have is in the onboarding flow. So in Germany, when you open a bank account, one way to do it is fully online, is via video ident, and obviously the mobile app is a really good device for that.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I suppose if you were checking the money in your account, your wealth, you might, if you suddenly had a big missing piece of that wealth, you'd want to call up, you want to use another channel. So, joining these things up, some of it is actually common sense in some ways. But Bragi, you really have to be clever about thinking, what customer, you have to offer capacity, but then really focus on what the customer needs. So it is such a difficult way to balance up what you need to do through mobile. What do you think, do you have to have your other channels not only consistent, but on standby for things that mobile will throw up if you do a mobile first strategy?
But look, I think there are so many things you could decide to bring into your mobile banking app, and I think you need to decide, and you need to look at your demography and your country, and you have to pick. But I also think there's ways to build depth into the mobile app in ways that isn't intrusive, and I think that's really the key here. And the second thing I'll say is that, of course, not everything needs to be in the mobile app. I mean, we've built budgeting functions into mobile app in 3 different ways. It doesn't really work, right? So that you have to think about the kind of attention span you have in the app, and then you have to decide what goes to what channel. I mean, I think that's key.
Olav, you agree with that? I can see you nodding. So that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
It does. And I think what we try to do is when we build a service and we build a product of any sorts, that we build it in such a way that you can, of course, consume it in the mobile app and expose it to the customers. But typically, as you say, there's a short attention span, and maybe you want to expand on that universe in other channels. So we try to build the components, the features, in such a way that you can actually expose that, of course, in the online banking app. Or the online bank, but also that you can actually leverage that in the customer center or in the retail branches, and sort of bringing those services out to the customers in multiple channels, and sort of actually being able to engage much more. And I think clearly also exposing those services through open APIs, through third parties, integrating that into ecosystems. I think the opportunity there to sort of build for mobile but expose broadly is one which at least we find very, very interesting.
Yeah, Marcel, can I just ask you? You're 6 months in. How's it going so far?
We are working actively with our customers to improve the app. So I think what Bragi, you mentioned, launching early, iterating quickly, listening to customer feedback. This is going really well with the app. And as I said, for the 2 use cases, the 2 main use cases, we identified the onboarding and checking the wealth. We see a lot of activity. And now together with our customers, we are looking at what is the next step.
Yeah.
We have another question coming through right here for which we didn't expect, but let's have it to you. We'll throw it to you in a second. But one final thing, Marcel, are you getting more feedback? Do you feel you're closer to your customers by having a really good active mobile app? Is that starting to work through as a way to connect?
It does. We actually built in feedback loops within the app. And by this, especially for new features, we get a lot of relevant feedback almost in real time. Right. So this works out for us.
Very good. So the question here, I'll throw it, if you don't mind, to you, Bragi. It sounds like creating a great mobile experience is as much a brand strategy as a user experience strategy. I mean, it's actually, I mean, I guess it's almost the presence within my life. Then it becomes brand. Then the tone of voice becomes brand. What do you feel about that? I mean, you're the marketing brain.
Question.
So, yeah.
But I sort of off the top of my head, I don't think it's one or the other. I think if you build, like, you can't have an app that builds your brand unless people actually use it, and people will not use it if you don't have an excellent user experience. But I do think, like, I mean, if you have the best banking app in the market, it's going to do wonders for your brand, because that's where people are, you know. So I think it's it reinforces, you know, one another, if you like.
Yeah. You can still ask a question, actually. I mean, it's not something we expected to do, but please do. If you're hovering over the ask button right now, do send us a question, and we have a few minutes. So let's see if we can get those questions in. We'll see how we get on. That's not part of the normal routine, but we'd love to hear from you. So please do if you want to ask a question. What do you think in terms of today's session, Marcel? What have you learned? What have we taken away from today? And we've covered quite a few areas on that customer journey, from technology to the human touch. You know, in our panel as well, we talked about some of the strategies, some of the channels, and how to connect them up. You know, what are you feeling? And as a banker, also a commentator.
So I think one common theme that were present in all of the sessions was data. You need to get your data right to support the customer journey, to get the right features into your app, and to take the right business decisions. So I think this is, I mean, we know it's not a new trend. We all know that, but we still need to pay a lot of attention to that. Yeah, I think another thing, the mobile app is probably one a good place that crystallizes a lot of customer expectations. So, for example, you launch a mobile app, you raise customer expectations about something happening in real time. Yeah. So, for example, real-time payments, and then you also need a core banking system that supports this. So it's a nice way to bring it all together and to get this feedback from the customer, which really impacts the core of your business or your technology.
Bragi, you're nodding at that. Does that make a lot of sense to you as well?
No, yeah, I think so. I think it, you know, I think at the end of the day, I mean, you sort of need to figure out the path to make that engagement sustainable. And I think that's a combination of how you build things and what you put in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And Olav as well. I mean, you know, ultimately, and we've talked a lot today with our panels and so on, about, you know, the elements it takes to connect with customers, for the customers to actually have access to your services in whatever way they want. The same old thing as we've always talked about: what I want, when I want it, how I want it, where I want it. This is what we're talking about here. But I suppose ultimately we're trying to connect a little bit more in terms of banking, offering great services, responsive services. And there are two R's that I would mention. I wonder whether you agree: responsive and relevant. I mean, we haven't mentioned those really today, but if we're responsive and relevant, hey, it's a home run, right?
No, I think definitely. And there's, as you say, in terms of being there, being present, sort of giving the customer the user experience and the offerings that they want, where they want it, is clearly the strategy to go. I think that's almost obvious. And then I think building on that becomes this mobile first. You clearly see the traffic and the engagement sort of growing and coming to that platform. And I think that's also why you see a lot of both incumbent banks and sort of newcomers into that market investing so much into that platform, because that's really where you see that the customers are also coming and the users are also engaging with. Yeah.
You've mentioned engagement. I'll just throw one more question around, and then we'll start to close up the morning session. But Olav, engagement. What is it that you see? What is it that we need to see to show that people are engaged? That we are not just checking our balance, if that's engagement, but doing a bit more with you, starting to use your services, being interested in what you do and how you do it. How can you engage?
Yeah. I think it's about bringing those value-added services onto and in front of those use cases that you're mentioning. And I don't think the metric for success in a mobile bank is sort of the time that you spend, or how much time are you actually spending in that mobile bank. Because if it takes a lot of time to conduct your payment flow, or if it's sort of super complicated to check your balance or super complicated to do your daily banking stuff, then that's sort of flawed. And you don't want people to spend a lot of time doing that. But I think if you get engagement and if you get people into your apps and into your channels, engaging with the advice that you can give to the customer, and sort of having a dialogue of what can we do to improve your financial situation. What is it the content, what is the service that we can engage you with, what is the tip that you would actually like to get in there, and sort of have a dialogue digitally around that, then that's clearly where you would like to see more time being spent in that interaction. And I think that's actually mutually beneficial. It's not only us as a bank who wants that, it's also for the customers. I think we can provide a lot of true value of giving you actually insight, overview of your financial situation, and sort of actually guide you in the right direction. So I clearly see that it's a mutual beneficial relationship here with the banks and the customers that you can have.
Very good point, Bragi. You have to prove it. The interaction might be there. You might have engagement, but really, as a bank, you have to prove that you are helping customers.
No, absolutely, and I fully agree with all of you. It's not about the quantity of the engagement. It's really about the quality, and I think that's not just what banking is realizing, but the rest of the app world is realizing. It's about being respectful of people's time. So it's actually sometimes tricky to kind of measure, when have you gotten it right. But I think you need to be fearlessly tracking what people are doing and where they're spending time in your app. And then, of course, ultimately, like when we work with many of our clients, I mean, sometimes the ultimate measure of whether we have been successful is if people's finances have improved. Have they managed to save money? Are they finally spending money on the things that they want to spend on? And the objectives are different, but I think you need to have that holistic view of the impact that you're having. It's not just about number of logins and how much time you spend.
A final point to you, Marcel. Look, I mean, there's a lot to learn as the tech journey continues for Raisin. Mixing the old with the new. We talked about hyper personalizing, connecting everything and becoming omni-channel. I guess, relationship is really important to you guys. So you will find the balance of relationship, whether it's using technology and apps or whether it's using conventional means. I guess you've just got to find your own route through, haven't you?
Yes. So I think there's one aspect I would like to mention that we haven't touched upon yet, and I think it's really important for the relationship and the trust building with the customer, which in the end for financial institutions is crucial. And this is failure loops. So when something goes wrong, the customer has forgotten the password, lost his card, maybe made a wrong payment, and the customer thinks, oh, what has happened? How can I get out of this mess? If then he gets this delightful experience of either via customer service, self-service and we can prove to him, here we can add a value, we help you, it's actually not a problem. This really brings the ultimate trustful relationship, and then also the engagement. So I think this is one aspect we should, at least at Raisin, spend more time on, and it's very valuable for the customer relationship.
Very good. If I could, I would start the session again and we'd start with that question. It's a really, really good point that we've all been there, I'm sure. Thanks very much, Marcel. Thanks very much to both of our speakers, to Bragi and Olav. And obviously, thanks very much to our sponsors who are ForgeRock and Meniga today. We're back later on today at 2 o'clock Central European time with session 7, Next Level Analytics in Banking and Payments. We'll see you there. Take care.